Imagine walking into a five-star hotel only to be judged and dismissed for your clothes. Now picture that happening to Cristiano Ronaldo, the secret owner, ready to turn the tables with a lesson in respect. The Miami sun blazed outside, casting golden streaks through the towering glass doors of the Ocean Crest Hotel, a shimmering beacon of luxury nestled along South Beach. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors that reflected crystal chandeliers, their light dancing like stars on a clear night. A soft jazz melody drifted from hidden speakers, wrapping the space in an air of effortless elegance. The faint clink of champagne glasses echoed from the bar, where suited businessmen and tanned vacationers mingled, their laughter a low hum beneath the grandeur. At the heart of it all stood the reception desk, a sleek slab of black granite manned by Claire Donovan, a receptionist with a sharp jawline and sharper attitude. Her blonde hair was pulled into a flawless bun, her navy blazer crisp, her eyes scanning every guest with a practiced judgment that could slice through confidence like a knife. She was the gatekeeper of this exclusive world, and she wore that power like a crown. Before we dive into Cristiano Ronaldo's game-changing hotel visit, drop a 1 in the comments if you're ready for an inspiring story, hit like if you're not, and subscribe to catch the shocking twist at the end. Cristiano Ronaldo stepped through the revolving doors, his presence unnoticed in the bustle of the lobby. He wore a simple grey hoodie, faded jeans, and a black baseball cap pulled low, shielding his chiseled features. No flashy watches, no designer labels, just a man blending into the crowd, his broad shoulders relaxed, his stride easy. In his hand, he clutched a plain manila envelope, its edges slightly worn, containing documents that would turn this hotel upside down. Ronaldo wasn't here to flaunt his fame or his fortune. He'd bought the Ocean Crest quietly, a silent investor who wanted to see the truth of his new venture. He'd heard whispers, complaints about staff arrogance, about guests judged by their wallets rather than their worth. Today, he'd come to test those rumors himself, to walk among the guests as one of them, unseen, uncelebrated, just another face in the crowd. His dark eyes scanned the lobby, taking in the polished surfaces, the immaculate uniforms, the faint air of superiority that clung to the place like expensive cologne. He approached the reception desk, his sneakers silent on the marble. Claire's gaze flicked up, her lips tightening into a thin line as she sized him up. The hoodie, the jeans, the lack of a flashy suitcase, it all screamed nobody to her. She leaned forward slightly, her manicured nails tapping the counter, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" The question wasn't polite. It was a challenge, laced with a condescension that made Ronaldo's jaw tighten. He met her eyes, his own steady, calm, the same focus that had carried him through countless high-stakes matches. "Yes," he said simply, his voice low, accented but clear. "It's under Ronaldo." Claire's eyebrows arched, her skepticism a living thing. She crossed her arms, her blazer creasing slightly. "Ronaldo, huh? I'll need the reservation number." Her tone suggested he was wasting her time, an intruder in her pristine domain. Ronaldo reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled slip of paper with a confirmation code scribbled in his own handwriting. He slid it across the counter, his movements deliberate, his face unreadable. Claire snatched it, her eyes narrowing as she typed into her computer, her fingers striking the keys with unnecessary force. The screen glowed, casting a faint blue light across her face, and she let out a small, triumphant huff. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no reservation under that name." She leaned back, her arms crossing again, her voice dripping with finality. "This is a private establishment. If you don't have a valid reservation, I'll need you to leave." The words hit like a slap, and a few nearby guests glanced over, their curiosity piqued. A man in a tailored suit sipped his coffee, his eyes lingering on Ronaldo, while a woman in a sundress whispered to her friend, her head tilting as if trying to place him. Ronaldo stood still, his breath slow, his heart steady. He'd faced worse. Hostile crowds, ruthless defenders, the weight of a nation's expectations. This was nothing, yet it stung in a different way. Not for him, but for every person who'd ever walked into a place like this and been made to feel small. He thought of his childhood in Madeira, the cramped apartment, the dreams that seemed impossible until he clawed his way to the top. He'd never forgotten what it felt like to be underestimated, to be judged by what he lacked rather than what he carried inside. "There might be a mistake," he said, his voice still calm, almost gentle. Can you check again? Claire's eyes flashed with irritation, her lips pursing. I've checked, sir, she snapped, her voice loud enough to draw more glances. If you're not a guest, you need to leave. Now. Behind the desk, a young bellhop named Miguel hesitated, his hands fidgeting with a luggage cart. He was barely 20, his uniform slightly too big, his dark hair falling into his eyes. He'd grown up watching Ronaldo's games, his family crowded around a flickering TV in their small Miami apartment, cheering every goal, every impossible dribble. There was something familiar about the man at the desk. The way he stood, the quiet confidence in his posture. Miguel's heart raced. Could it be? He glanced at Claire, her authority a wall he didn't dare cross, but his eyes kept darting to Ronaldo, searching for confirmation. He wanted to speak, to say something, but fear kept his lips sealed. Ronaldo felt the weight of the moment, the eyes on him, the tension coiling in the air. He reached for the manila envelope, his fingers brushing the paper as if weighing his next move. I have something that might help, he said, his voice steady but firm, a hint of steel beneath the calm. He slid the envelope across the counter, its simplicity stark against the polished granite. Claire scoffed, her eyes rolling as she snatched it, tearing it open with a flick of her wrist. She pulled out a single sheet, her gaze skimming the text, then freezing. Her face paled, her fingers tightening on the paper. The document bore the logo of Crest Enterprises, the parent company of the Ocean Crest Hotel. And there, in bold print, was a name. Cristiano Ronaldo, majority shareholder and new owner. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Claire's eyes flicked up to Ronaldo, her arrogance crumbling like sand. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Miguel, still frozen behind her, let out a small gasp, his eyes wide with recognition. It's him, he whispered, barely audible, but the words carried a weight that rippled through the room. A guest, Mrs. Thompson, a silver-haired woman in a floral dress, leaned forward in her armchair, her glasses slipping down her nose. She'd been watching the exchange, her maternal instincts picking up on the injustice. Honey, she murmured to her teenage son, Ethan, a soccer fanatic clutching a phone with a Ronaldo wallpaper. Isn't that? Ethan's jaw dropped, his fingers fumbling as he zoomed in on his phone, comparing the man at the desk to the icon on his screen. Claire's hands trembled, the document shaking in her grip. She tried to recover, her voice faltering. This must be a mistake, she stammered, but the confidence was gone, replaced by a creeping dread. Ronaldo's gaze never wavered, his eyes locking onto hers, not with anger, but with a quiet intensity that cut deeper than any shout. No mistake, he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that filled the room. I'm here to see how this place runs, how you treat people when you think no one's watching. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Claire's face flushed, her lips parting as if to protest, but she had nothing left to say. The lobby's jazz melody seemed to fade, the clink of glasses distant now. All eyes were on Ronaldo, the man who'd walked in as a stranger and now stood as something more. Mrs. Thompson rose from her chair, her hand on Ethan's shoulder, her voice soft but clear. Young lady, she said to Claire, you ought to be ashamed, judging a man like that. Ethan, emboldened, held up his phone, the screen glowing with a photo of Ronaldo in his prime, mid-goal celebration. It's really him, he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. The other guests began to murmur, their whispers a rising tide. Is that Cristiano Ronaldo? No way here. Why is she treating him like that? Miguel stepped forward, his courage finally breaking through. Mr. Ronaldo, he said, his voice shaky but sincere. I'm so sorry. I knew it was you, but I didn't say anything. I should have. His eyes dropped, guilt etching his young face. Ronaldo's expression softened, a small smile tugging at his lips. It's okay, kid, he said, his tone warm, like a coach encouraging a rookie. You're speaking now. That's what matters. Miguel's shoulders relaxed, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Claire, meanwhile, was unraveling. She clutched the counter, her knuckles white, her authority shattered. She'd built her career on control, on wielding her position like a shield. But now it was gone, exposed under the weight of her own actions. She glanced at the security guard approaching from the far end of the lobby, his walkie-talkie crackling, his stride purposeful. She'd called him moments ago, ready to have this nobody escorted out. Now the sight of him made her stomach churn. "Wait," she croaked, her voice barely audible, but the guard was already closing in, his hand on his belt, his eyes scanning Ronaldo with suspicion. Ronaldo stood his ground, the envelope now open on the counter, its contents a silent indictment. He didn't need to raise his voice or throw his weight around. His presence was enough, a quiet storm that demanded attention. The guard slowed, sensing the shift in the room, his eyes darting from Claire to Ronaldo to the growing crowd of onlookers. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer, her voice firm now. "You don't need to do that, officer," she said, her tone protective, almost maternal. "This man belongs here more than any of us." Ethan nodded vigorously, his phone still clutched like a talisman. The air was thick with anticipation, every guest and staff member waiting for Ronaldo's next move. He could have ended it there, demanded an apology, fired Claire on the spot, made a spectacle of his power. But that wasn't his way. He'd learned long ago that true strength wasn't in dominance but in dignity. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost a whisper, but every word carried a weight that silenced the room. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," he said, his eyes fixed on Claire. "I came to see what kind of place this is, what kind of people run it. And what I've seen, it's not what I want for my hotel." Claire's breath hitched, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She knew she'd crossed a line, but the full weight of it was only now sinking in. Miguel stood frozen, his heart pounding, torn between awe and shame. Mrs. Thompson and Ethan watched in silence, their presence a quiet support. The other guests leaned closer, their whispers fading as they sensed the gravity of the moment. Ronaldo's hand rested on the counter, the manila envelope a stark reminder of the truth he carried. He wasn't just a guest, he wasn't just a celebrity, he was the owner, and he'd seen enough to know that change was coming, whether Claire was ready for it or not. The Ocean Crest Hotel's lobby seemed to pulse with a silent energy, the jazz melody now a faint whisper beneath the weight of the moment. The marble floors gleamed, but their shine felt cold, almost accusing, as every eye fixed on Cristiano Ronaldo. He stood at the reception desk, his grey hoodie and jeans a stark contrast to the polished grandeur around him, yet his presence filled the space like a spotlight. The manila envelope lay open on the granite counter, its contents, documents naming him the new owner, exposed like an unhealed wound. Claire Donovan, the receptionist who'd dismissed him with venom, gripped the edge of the counter, her face drained of color, her once sharp eyes now wide with panic. Her perfect bun was loosening, a single strand of blonde hair falling across her cheek, a small crack in her flawless facade. The security guard, halted mid-step, hovered awkwardly, his walkie-talkie silent, his authority dwarfed by the unfolding drama. Miguel, the young bellhop, stood behind Claire, his hands trembling, his dark eyes locked on Ronaldo with a mix of awe and guilt. Mrs. Thompson and her son Ethan, the soccer-obsessed teen, watched from nearby, their faces a blend of indignation and anticipation. The lobby's other guests, businessmen, vacationers, a young couple snapping selfies, had fallen quiet, their murmurs replaced by a collective hush, as if the air itself waited for Ronaldo's next words. Claire's lips parted, her voice a shaky whisper. I didn't know," she stammered, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "I thought you were—" She trailed off, unable to finish, her arrogance crumbling under the weight of her mistake. Ronaldo's gaze held hers, not with anger, but with a piercing clarity that made her squirm. His jaw tightened, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face, but he didn't speak. Not yet. He let the silence stretch, let it press against Claire's chest, let it force her to face the truth she'd ignored. Miguel, unable to stay silent any longer, stepped forward, his voice cracking. "It's him, Claire. It's Cristiano Ronaldo." The name hung in the air, a spark that ignited whispers among the guests. "Ronaldo? The soccer guy? No way, that's him?" The young couple stopped their selfie, the woman's phone slipping slightly as she stared. Ethan, clutching his own phone with its Ronaldo wallpaper, nodded vigorously, his eyes shining. "I told you, Mom," he whispered to Mrs. Thompson, who patted his shoulder, her lips pursed in quiet approval. Claire's eyes darted to the document again, her fingers brushing the paper as if hoping it would vanish. It didn't. The Crest Enterprises logo stared back, Ronaldo's name in bold, undeniable. Her breath hitched, a soft sob catching in her throat. She'd built her career on control, on judging who belonged and who didn't, but now she was the one out of place, her authority stripped bare. Ronaldo finally spoke, his voice low, steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You didn't know who I was," he said, his accent soft but clear. "But that's not the problem. The problem is you thought I didn't belong here, that I wasn't worth your time." Each word landed like a stone, heavy with truth. Claire flinched, her hands dropping to her sides, her nails digging into her palms. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking to the floor, sensing he'd walked into something far bigger than a routine call. Miguel's face burned with shame. He'd recognized Ronaldo from the start, those broad shoulders, that quiet confidence, but he'd stayed silent, cowed by Claire's authority. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ronaldo," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something. I knew it was you." His eyes dropped, his shoulders hunching as if expecting a reprimand. Ronaldo's expression softened, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You're young," he said, his tone warm, almost fatherly. "You'll learn. Courage takes time." Miguel's eyes lifted, a flicker of hope breaking through his guilt. He nodded, his hands steadying, as if Ronaldo's words had anchored him. The lobby's tension shifted, a ripple of curiosity spreading among the guests. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer, her floral dress swaying, her voice firm but kind. "This young lady needs to learn some manners," she said, her gaze fixed on Claire. "You can't treat people like that, famous or not." Ethan, emboldened, held up his phone, the screen glowing with a photo of Ronaldo mid-goal, his iconic celebration frozen in time. "He's the greatest ever," Ethan said, his voice loud enough to draw a few nods from the crowd. The young couple whispered excitedly, the man pulling up a video of Ronaldo's highlights, the sound of cheering faintly audible. Claire's face burned, her eyes darting from face to face, finding no ally, no escape. At that moment, Mr. Larson, the hotel's seasoned concierge, emerged from a side office, his silver hair neatly combed, his pinstriped suit immaculate. He'd been alerted by a frantic call from a junior staffer, his brisk stride slowing as he took in the scene. His eyes widened at the sight of Ronaldo, recognition dawning instantly. "Mr. Ronaldo," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with urgency. "I'm terribly sorry for any misunderstanding. If I'd known you were visiting—" He trailed off, shooting Claire a sharp glance. Claire shrank under his scrutiny, her hands twisting together, her composure unraveling. Ronaldo raised a hand, silencing Larson. "That's the point," he said, his voice firm. "I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to see how you treat people when you think they're nobody." Larson's face paled, his professional mask slipping. He'd worked in hospitality for 30 years, prided himself on fairness, but he knew the hotel had issues, whispers of elitism, of staff favoring wealth over warmth. He glanced at Claire, his disappointment clear, but he stayed silent, letting Ronaldo lead. Ronaldo turned back to Claire, his eyes searching hers, not for weakness, but for something human, something redeemable. "I grew up with nothing," he said, his voice softer now, almost confiding. "A small island, a small house, a big dream. People judged me then too, thought I'd never make it, but I did. Not because of money or fame, but because I worked, because I believed, and because people gave me a chance." The words hit Claire like a wave, her eyes glistening, her breath shallow. She thought of her own start, fresh out of college, eager to please, vowing to treat every guest like family. Somewhere along the way, the long hours, the demanding clients, the pressure to uphold the hotel's image had hardened her, turned her into someone she barely recognized. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a choked sound emerged. Ronaldo didn't push her. He stepped back, giving her space, his gaze shifting to the lobby, taking in the faces watching him, guests, staff, strangers who now felt like witnesses to something profound. Miguel, still near the desk, felt a knot in his chest loosen. Ronaldo's story echoed his own. His parents had come to Miami with nothing, scraping by to give him a better life. He'd taken this job to help them, but he'd felt invisible, overshadowed by Claire's authority, by the hotel's rigid hierarchy. Now, standing in Ronaldo's presence, he felt seen, his small act of courage validated. Mrs. Thompson, sensing the shift, squeezed Ethan's shoulder, her eyes soft with pride. "That's a real man," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his phone forgotten, his admiration for Ronaldo deepening beyond goals and trophies. Ronaldo picked up the envelope, folding it carefully, his movements deliberate. "This hotel is mine now," he said, his voice rising slightly, addressing not just Claire but everyone. "But it's not about me. It's about the people who walk through those doors. Every single one of them deserves respect, not because of what they wear or what they drive, but because they're human." The words resonated, a quiet command that seemed to straighten spines, to still restless hands. Larson nodded, his respect for Ronaldo growing, his mind already racing with ways to address the hotel's flaws. Claire, however, stood frozen, her tears finally spilling over, silent but unmistakable. She didn't wipe them away, didn't hide, as if accepting the weight of her shame. The young couple, now fully engrossed, approached hesitantly, the woman clutching her phone. "Mr. Ronaldo," she said, her voice shy, Can we get a picture?" Ronaldo's smile returned, warm and genuine, breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. "Sure," he said, stepping toward them, his ease disarming. The man fumbled with the phone, snapping a quick shot, his grin wide. "Thank you, man. You're a legend." Ronaldo nodded, his humility a quiet rebuke to Claire's earlier disdain. The lobby stirred, guests relaxing, the atmosphere lightening, but the lesson lingered, heavy and unshakable. Claire watched the exchange, her heart pounding. She'd misjudged him, written him off as an intruder, when he was the one who belonged most. She thought of the countless guests she'd dismissed, families in worn clothes, solo travelers with cheap bags, each one a missed chance to be kind. The realization burned, a fire she couldn't extinguish. She glanced at Larson, expecting a reprimand, but he was focused on Ronaldo, his expression one of quiet resolve. Miguel, too, seemed changed, his posture straighter, his eyes brighter, as if Ronaldo's words had lit something inside him. Ronaldo turned back to the desk, his gaze settling on Claire once more. "I'm not here to ruin anyone," he said, his voice steady, almost gentle. "But I won't let this place stay the way it is. It's got to change, starting now." The promise in his words was unmistakable, a challenge and a chance rolled into one. Claire nodded, a small, jerky movement, her tears still falling. She didn't trust herself to speak, didn't know if she could. The lobby watched, the guests, the staff, the air thick with possibility, with the sense that something broken was beginning to mend. Ronaldo's presence, his quiet strength, had shifted the room, and Claire knew, deep in her bones, that nothing would be the same. The Ocean Crest Hotel's lobby, once a stage for Claire's misjudgment and Ronaldo's quiet revelation, now pulsed with a different energy. The chandeliers still sparkled, the marble floors still gleamed, but the air felt lighter, as if the weight of the earlier confrontation had lifted, leaving room for something new. Cristiano Ronaldo stood near the reception desk, his grey hoodie and jeans unchanged, yet his presence filled the space like a beacon. The manila envelope, now back in his hand, was a silent reminder of his authority, but it was his words, calm, firm, rooted in a lifetime of overcoming doubt that lingered in the minds of everyone present. Claire Donovan, her face still flushed with shame, stood behind the counter, her hands no longer gripping it for support but folded tightly as if holding herself together. Miguel, the young bellhop, hovered nearby, his eyes bright with a mix of awe and resolve, his earlier hesitation replaced by a quiet courage. Mr. Larson, the seasoned concierge, stood at Ronaldo's side, his posture straight, his face etched with determination to right the wrongs he'd witnessed. The guests, Mrs. Thompson, her son Ethan, and a growing crowd of onlookers, watched in hushed anticipation, their whispers fading as they sensed the moment was far from over. Ronaldo's gaze swept the lobby, taking in the faces of staff and guests alike. He saw Claire's trembling remorse, Miguel's eager hope, Mr. Larson's seasoned resolve, and the curiosity of strangers who'd stumbled into a story they'd never forget. He could have left then, his point made, his ownership revealed, but that wasn't his way. He'd built his career on pushing beyond the expected, on turning moments of challenge into triumphs. This hotel, his hotel, was no different. It wasn't enough to expose its flaws. He needed to plant the seeds for change. He turned to Mr. Larson, his voice low but clear. I want to talk to the staff. All of them. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Mr. Larson's eyes widened, but he nodded, his years of service kicking in. Yes, sir. I'll make it happen. He glanced at a nearby staff member, a young woman in a crisp uniform, and gave a quick nod. She scurried off, her phone already in hand, relaying the order to gather the team. Claire's breath caught, her eyes flicking to Ronaldo, then to the floor. A staff meeting now? She knew what this meant. A reckoning, not just for her, but for the culture she'd helped perpetuate. Miguel, though, felt a spark of excitement. He'd never seen a boss like this, someone who didn't just give orders but stood in the middle of the mess, ready to fix it. Mrs. Thompson, still standing with Ethan, murmured to her son, This is leadership, honey. Watch and learn. Ethan, his phone now tucked away, nodded, his eyes glued to Ronaldo, the hero of his childhood, now a teacher in real life. The lobby began to shift, guests drifting back to their drinks or conversations, but many lingered, drawn to the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. A single mother, Maria, sat in a corner armchair, her toddler asleep in her lap, her worn suitcase at her feet. She'd checked in earlier, brushed off by Claire with a curt smile, and now she watched Ronaldo with quiet hope, her fingers tracing her daughter's hair. Within minutes, the staff began to gather. Waiters in black vests, housekeepers in grey smocks, bartenders wiping their hands on aprons. They streamed into the lobby, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. Mr. Larson directed them to a conference room just off the main hall, its glass walls offering a view of the ocean beyond. The room was meant for corporate retreats, with plush chairs and a long mahogany table, but today it would serve a different purpose. Ronaldo led the way, his stride easy but purposeful, the manila envelope tucked under his arm. Miguel followed close behind, his heart pounding, while Claire trailed at the back, her steps hesitant, her eyes downcast. Mr. Larson ushered the group in, his voice steady but urgent. Everyone, please take a seat. This won't take long, but it's important. The staff filed in, their murmurs a low hum, some recognizing Ronaldo now, their eyes widening as whispers spread. Is that? No way, Cristiano Ronaldo? What's he doing here? Ronaldo stood at the head of the table, not behind it, but in front, his posture relaxed, his hands in his pockets. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint crash of waves through the open windows. He looked at the faces before him, young, old, tired, eager, skeptical, and saw not just employees but people, each with their own struggles, their own dreams. He thought of his own journey, the boy from Madeira who'd kicked a battered ball through dusty streets, the teenager mocked for his accent, the man who'd fought to be more than a stereotype. I'm not here to give a speech, he began, his voice clear, his accent a soft cadence that drew them in. I'm here to tell you a story about a kid who had nothing but a dream, a kid who was told he'd never make it, who was judged by where he came from, what he didn't have. That kid was me. The room leaned forward, every eye on him. Claire, seated near the back, felt her chest tighten. She'd expected a lecture, a list of her failures, but this was different, this was personal. Miguel, sitting near the front, hung on every word, his thoughts drifting to his own family, their sacrifices, their quiet pride. Ronaldo continued, his voice steady but rich with emotion. My mom worked late, cleaning houses, cooking for others. She came home exhausted, but she never stopped smiling. She taught me that respect isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. I carried that with me, through every game, every loss, every win, and I'm carrying it here, to this hotel. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, landing briefly on Claire, then Miguel, then a housekeeper named Rosa, whose calloused hands rested on the table, her face lined with years of hard work. I walked in today as a nobody, Ronaldo said, his voice dropping, forcing them to lean closer. No suit, no watch, just a guy with a reservation, and I was treated like I didn't belong, not because I was rude, not because I broke rules, but because of how I looked. Claire's face burned, her hands twisting in her lap. She wanted to sink into the floor, but Ronaldo's gaze wasn't accusing. It was searching, asking her to listen, to understand. "That's not just about me," he went on. "It's about every person who walks through those doors. The single mom with a kid, the guy delivering food, the family saving for a vacation. They're not just guests, they're people, and they deserve to feel like they matter." Rosa, the housekeeper, nodded faintly, her eyes glistening. She'd felt invisible for years, her work unnoticed, her presence ignored by guests like the ones Claire fawned over. Miguel thought of his dad, who'd been turned away from fancy places like this, his work clothes marking him as less. Even Mr. Larson, with his decades of experience, felt a pang of guilt. He'd let the hotel's culture drift, too busy with schedules and VIPs to notice the growing divide between staff and guests. Ronaldo's words were a wake-up call, not just for Claire, but for all of them. "This place," Ronaldo said, gesturing to the walls, the ocean beyond, "is beautiful. But beauty's nothing without heart. I don't want a hotel that's just a pretty picture. I want one that changes how people feel when they walk in. That starts with you." He stepped forward, his hands now out of his pockets, his voice rising with quiet conviction. "I've been in rooms where everyone doubted me, on the field, in boardrooms, in life. I didn't prove them wrong by shouting or showing off. I did it by working harder, by being better, by never forgetting where I came from. That's what I'm asking you to do. Be better. Not for me, not for a paycheck, but for the people who trust us with their time, their money, their memories." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a vow. Claire's eyes were wet now, her earlier defiance gone, replaced by a raw, aching regret. She thought of her first day at the ocean crest, her promise to make every guest feel welcome, a promise she'd broken long ago. Ronaldo turned to Mr. Larson, his voice softer now. "I want training, not just rules, but real change. Teach your team to see people, not wallets. Teach them that respect isn't a favor, it's a standard." Mr. Larson nodded, his throat tight. "We'll do it, sir. I'll make sure of it." Ronaldo then looked at Claire, his gaze direct but not harsh. "You made a mistake today," he said, his voice steady. "But mistakes don't define you. What you do next does. Show me who you really are." Claire's breath hitched, a sob catching in her throat. She nodded, unable to speak, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. Miguel, watching her, felt a surge of hope. If Ronaldo could forgive her, maybe there was a chance for all of them to start over. The meeting ended, but the energy lingered. The staff filed out, their faces a mix of awe, shame, and determination. Ronaldo stayed behind, speaking quietly with Mr. Larson, who scribbled notes on a pad, his resolve clear. Miguel approached, his voice hesitant but earnest. "Mr. Ronaldo, I want to be like you someday. Not the famous part, but the way you make people feel. Like they're enough." Ronaldo smiled, a real one, his hand clapping Miguel's shoulder. "You already are, kid. Just keep showing up." Miguel's chest swelled, his dreams feeling closer than ever. Back in the lobby, Claire stood at the desk, her hands still, her eyes red but clear. She saw Maria, the single mother, struggling with her suitcase as she prepared to leave. Claire hesitated, then stepped out from behind the counter, her voice soft. "Let me help you, ma'am." Maria looked surprised, then grateful, her tired face softening. Claire carried the suitcase to the door, her movements gentle, her usual sharpness gone. Maria thanked her, her voice warm, and Claire felt something shift, a small step, but a real one. Days later, the Ocean Crest began to change. Mr. Larson and Miguel led the charge, organizing training sessions with a focus on empathy, on seeing every guest as a story, not a status. Rosa, the housekeeper, shared her own experiences, her voice quiet but powerful, inspiring others to speak up. Claire, once the gatekeeper of exclusivity, now greeted every guest with a genuine smile, her apologies not in words but in actions. She remembered Maria, the way her daughter had clung to her leg, and made a point to check on families, to offer small kindnesses, a toy for a child, a late checkout for a tired parent. A week after Ronaldo's visit, a letter arrived, left anonymously at the desk. Mr. Larson opened it, his voice steady as he read it aloud to the staff. "I came here feeling like I didn't belong," it said. "A single mom, no fancy clothes, just me and my kid. but your team made us feel like family. Thank you for giving us a memory we'll carry forever." The room was silent, then erupted in soft applause, not for themselves, but for the change they'd begun. Claire's eyes welled up, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Miguel grinned, thinking of Ronaldo, of the promise he'd made to himself to lead with heart. Ronaldo never returned to speak of that day, never sought the spotlight for what he'd done. He'd left quietly, his mission complete, his legacy etched in the hotel's soul. But the Ocean Crest was different now, its walls holding more than luxury. They held stories of second chances, of respect reborn. Guests noticed the warmth, the way a porter chatted with a delivery driver, the way Claire's smile reached her eyes. And somewhere, in a small Miami apartment, Miguel taped a new photo to his wall, not of Ronaldo scoring a goal, but of a man standing tall, teaching a room to be better. The Ocean Crest wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a testament to what happened when one person dared to demand dignity and others dared to listen. The story of Cristiano Ronaldo's unexpected visit to the Ocean Crest Hotel is more than a tale of a celebrity revealing his power. It's a profound lesson in humanity, respect, and the transformative impact of leading with empathy. As I reflect on the narrative, from Ronaldo's quiet entrance in a hoodie to his powerful call for change, I'm struck by the emotional depth and universal truths it uncovers. This story resonates because it mirrors moments we've all faced, being judged, overlooked, or underestimated, and challenges us to rethink how we treat others and ourselves in everyday life. Below, I share my personal reflections on the story's key themes and the practical lessons we can apply to create a more compassionate world, all while drawing inspiration from Ronaldo's actions in a way that aligns with American cultural values of fairness, opportunity, and personal growth. One of the most striking aspects of the story is Ronaldo's decision to enter the hotel as an ordinary person, stripped of his fame and wealth. This choice speaks to his humility, a quality that's rare in a world obsessed with status. Growing up in America, where success is often measured by visible achievements, big houses, fancy cars, social media followers, it's easy to fall into the trap of judging people by their appearances. I've caught myself doing it, sizing up someone at a coffee shop based on their clothes, or dismissing a co-worker's ideas because they don't have a flashy title. Ronaldo's experience with Claire's condescension reminds me how damaging those snap judgments can be. The lesson here is clear. Every person carries a story we can't see. The barista, the delivery driver, the quiet colleague, they all have dreams, struggles, and worth that deserve respect. In my life, I'm committing to pause before judging, to ask questions instead of assuming, and to treat everyone with the dignity I'd want in return. Another powerful takeaway is Ronaldo's response to Claire's mistake. He could have humiliated her, demanded her firing, or used his power to crush her spirit. Instead, he chose compassion, confronting her error while giving her a chance to grow. This resonates deeply in a culture like America's, where second chances are a cornerstone of personal redemption stories. I think of times I've messed up, snapping at a friend, missing a deadline, or letting pride get in the way, and how much it meant when someone gave me grace instead of judgment. Ronaldo's approach shows that leadership isn't about dominance. It's about lifting others up, even when they've wronged you. In my own life, I want to emulate this by forgiving small slights, offering constructive feedback instead of criticism, and creating space for others to learn from their mistakes. Whether it's a family member who's hurt me or a coworker who's dropped the ball, I'll aim to respond with patience, remembering that growth often starts with a moment of mercy. The story also highlights the ripple effect of one person's actions. Ronaldo's words didn't just change Claire or Miguel, they transformed the entire hotel, from housekeepers to guests. This speaks to the American ideal of individual impact, where one voice can spark a movement. I'm inspired by how Ronaldo used his platform not for self-promotion, but to advocate for a culture of respect. It makes me think about my own influence, however small. Maybe it's smiling at a stranger, mentoring a younger coworker, or standing up when someone's treated unfairly. These acts might seem minor, but like Ronaldo's meeting with the staff, they can shift perspectives and inspire others. I'm challenging myself to be more intentional about my actions, knowing that even a kind word can create a chain reaction of positivity in my community, workplace, or family. Miguel's arc in the story adds another layer of inspiration. As a young man from a humble background, he sees himself in Ronaldo's story of overcoming odds. This resonates with the American dream, the belief that hard work and heart can transcend circumstances. I relate to Miguel's quiet admiration, his desire to be more than his current role allows. I've had moments of self-doubt, wondering if I'm enough to achieve my goals. Ronaldo's encouragement to Miguel, "You already are, kid," is a reminder that potential isn't tied to where you start, but to the choices you make. In my life, I'm applying this by setting small, achievable goals to build confidence, whether it's learning a new skill, volunteering, or speaking up in meetings. I also want to uplift others, like Ronaldo did for Miguel, by recognizing their efforts and reminding them of their value, especially when they feel invisible. Finally, the story underscores the importance of empathy as a daily practice. Ronaldo's call for training wasn't just about rules, it was about teaching the staff to see people as human beings with stories and struggles. In America's fast-paced culture, it's easy to rush through interactions, treating people as transactions. I've been guilty of this, checking my phone during a conversation or brushing off a cashier's small talk. Ronaldo's vision for the ocean crest challenges me to slow down, to listen, to connect. I'm committing to practice empathy by making eye contact, asking someone how their day's going, or offering help without expecting anything in return. These small acts can transform mundane moments into meaningful connections, just as Ronaldo's influence turned a cold hotel into a place of warmth. The lessons from this story, humility, compassion, influence, potential, and empathy, are universal, but they feel especially relevant in America, where diversity and opportunity create endless chances to bridge divides. Ronaldo's actions remind us that true greatness lies not in what we achieve, but in how we treat others. By applying these principles, I believe we can build stronger relationships, foster inclusive communities, and inspire those around us to do the same. It's not about being perfect, it's about showing up, like Ronaldo did, with a heart open to change and a commitment to doing better. If this story of Cristiano Ronaldo's powerful lesson in respect touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to show your support and share this video with your friends and family to spread its message of empathy and change. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss an inspiring story like this one. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been judged unfairly? Or have you seen someone turn a mistake into a moment of growth? Let's start a conversation and keep this journey of respect going. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.